The pleading woman. Mrs. Tony Roberts is the pleading woman. She just loves to ask for things. Her husband gives her all he can rake and scrape, which is considerably more than most wives get for their housekeeping. But she goes from door to door, begging for things. She starts at the store. "Mist Clark," she sings songs in a high keening voice. "Gimme li'l piece o' meat to boil a pot o' greens wid. Lord knows me, and my chillun is so hungry. Hit's a shame. Tony don't feed me." Mr. Clark knows that she has money and that her larder is well stocked, for Tony Roberts is the best provider on his list. But her keening annoys him, and he arises heavily. The pleader at this shows all the joy of a starving man being seated at a feast. "Tha's right, Mist Clark. De Lord loveth de cheerful giver. Gimme jes' a lil piece about dis big," indicating the width of her hand, "and de Lord'll bless ya." She follows this angel on earth to his meat tub and superintends the cutting, crying out in pain when he refuses to move the knife over just a teeny bit mo. Finally, meat in hand, she departs, remarking on the meanness of some people who give a piece of salt meat only 2 fingers wide when they were plainly asked for a hand-wide piece. Clark puts it down to Tony's account and resumes his reading. With the slab of salt pork as a foundation, she visits various homes until she has collected all she wants for the day. At the Pearsons, for instance, "Sister Pearson, please gimme a handful of collard greens for me and ma po chillun. Deed, me and ma chillun is so hungry. Tony don't feed me." Mrs. Pearson picks a bunch of greens for her, but she springs away from them as if they were poison. "Lawd a mussy, Miss Pearson, you ain't gonna gimme dat lil eyeful of greens for me and ma chillun, is you? Don't be so graspin'. God won't bless ya. Gimme a handful mo. Lawd, some folks has got everything, and they's jes' as gripin' and stingy." Mrs. Pearson raises the ante, and the pleading woman moves on to the next place, and on and on. The next day, it commences all over. 2. Turpentine love. Jim Merchant is always in good humor, even with his wife. He says he fell in love with her at first sight. That was some years ago. She has had all her teeth pulled out, but they still get along splendidly. He says the first time he called on her, he found out that she was subject to fits. This didn't cool his love, however. She had several in his presence. One Sunday, while he was there, she had one, and her mother tried to give her a dose of turpentine to stop it. Accidentally, she spilled it in her eye, and it cured her. She never had another fit, so they got married and have kept each other in good humor ever since. 3. Becky Moore has 11 children of assorted colors and sizes. She has never been married, but that is not her fault. She has never stopped any of the fathers of her children from proposing. So if she has no father for her children, it's not her fault. The men roundabout are entirely to blame. The other mothers of the town are afraid that it is catching. They won't let their children play with hers. 4. Tippy. Sykes Jones's family all shoot craps. The most interesting member of the family, also fond of bones, but of another kind, is Tippy, the Joneses' dog. He is so thin that it amazes one that he lives at all. He sneaks into village kitchens if the housewives are careless about the doors and steals meats, even off the stoves. He also sucks eggs. For these offenses, he has been sentenced to death dozens of times, and the sentences executed upon him, only they didn't work. He has been fed bluestone, strychnine, nux vomica, even an entire Peruna bottle beaten up. It didn't fatten him, but it didn't kill him. So Eatonville has resigned itself to the plague of Tippy, reflecting that it has erred in certain matters and is being chastened. In spite of all the attempts upon his life, Tippy is still willing to be friendly with anyone who will let him. V. The Way of a Man with a Train. Old Man Anderson lived 7 or 8 miles out in the country from Eatonville, over by Lake Apopka. He raised feed corn and cassava and went to market with it 2 or 3 times a year. He bought all of his victuals wholesale, so he wouldn't have to come to town for several months more. He was different from us city-bred folks. He had never seen a train. Everybody laughed at him, for even the smallest child in Eatonville had either been to Maitland or Orlando and watched a train go by. On Sunday afternoons, all of the young people of the village would go over to Maitland, a mile away, to see number 35 whiz southward on its way to Tampa and wave at the passengers, so we looked down on him a little. Even we children felt superior in the presence of a person so lacking in worldly knowledge. The grown-ups kept telling him he ought to go see a train. He always said he didn't have time to wait so long. Only 2 trains a day passed through Maitland. But patronage and ridicule finally had its effect, and Old Man Anderson drove in one morning early. Number 78 went north to Jacksonville at 10:20. He drove his light wagon over in the woods beside the railroad below Maitland and sat down to wait. He began to fear that his horse would get frightened and run away with the wagon, so he took him out and led him deeper into the grove and tied him securely. Then he returned to his wagon and waited some more. Then he remembered that some of the train-wise villagers had said the engine belched fire and smoke. He had better move his wagon out of danger. It might catch a fire. He climbed down from the seat and placed himself between the shafts to draw it away. Just then, 78 came thundering over the trestle, spouting smoke, and suddenly began blowing for Maitland. Old Man Anderson became so frightened he ran away with the wagon through the woods and tore it up worse than the horse ever could have done. He doesn't know yet what a train looks like and says he doesn't care. 6. Coon Taylor. Coon Taylor never did any real stealing. Of course, if he saw a chicken or a watermelon or muskmelon or anything like that he wanted, he'd take it. The people used to get mad, but they never could catch him. He took so many melons from Joe Clark that he set up in the melon patch one night with his shotgun loaded with rock salt. He was going to fix Coon, but he was tired. It is hard work being a mayor, postmaster, storekeeper, and everything. He dropped asleep sitting on a stump in the middle of the patch, so he didn't see Coon when he came. Coon didn't see him either, that is, not at first. He knew the stump was there, however. He had opened many of Clark's juicy Florida favorite on it. He selected his fruit, walked over to the stump, and burst the melon on it. That is, he thought it was the stump until it fell over with a yell. Then he knew it was no stump and departed hastily from those parts. He had cleared the fence when Clark came to, as it were. So the charge of rock salt was wasted on the desert air. During the sugarcane season, he found he couldn't resist Clark's soft green cane, but Clark did not go to sleep this time. So after he had cut 6 or 8 stalks by the moonlight, Clark rose up out of the cane strippings with his shotgun and made Coon sit right down and chew up the last one of them on the spot. And the next day, he made Coon leave his town for 3 months. 7. Village fiction. Joe Lindsay is said by Lumboger to be the largest manufacturer of prevarications in Eatonville. Brazel, late owner of the world's leanest and meanest mule, contends that his business is the largest in the state, and his wife holds that he is the biggest liar in the world. Exhibit A. He claims that while he was in Orlando one day, he saw a doctor cut open a woman, remove everything, liver, lights, and heart included. Clean each of them separately. The doctor then washed out the empty woman, dried her out neatly with a towel, and replaced the organs so expertly that she was up and about her work in a couple of weeks. 8. Sewell is a man who lives all to himself. He moves a great deal, so often that Lige Mosley says his chickens are so used to moving that every time he comes out into his backyard, the chickens lie down and cross their legs, ready to be tied up again. He is bald-headed, but he says he doesn't mind that because he wants as little as possible between him and God. Eink. Mrs. Clark is Joe Clark's wife. She is a soft-looking, middle-aged woman whose bust and stomach are always holding a get-together. She waits on the store sometimes and cries every time he yells at her, which he does every time she makes a mistake, which is quite often. She calls her husband Jody. They say he used to beat her in the store when he was a young man, but he is not so impatient now. He can wait until he goes home. She shouts in church every Sunday and shakes the hand of fellowship with everybody in the church with her eyes closed, but somehow always misses her husband. X. Mrs. McDuffie goes to church every Sunday and always shouts and tells her determination. Her husband always sits in the back row and beats her as soon as they get home. He says there's no sense in her shouting. As big a devil as she is, she just does it to slur him. Elijah Mosley asked her why she didn't stop shouting, seeing she always got a beating about it. She says she can't squinch the spirit. Then Elijah asked Mr. McDuffie to stop beating her, seeing that she was going to shout anyway. He answered that she just did it for spite, and that his fist was just as hard as her head. He could last just as long as she. So the village let the matter rest. 11. Double Shuffle. Back in the good old days before the World War, things were very simple in Eatonville. People didn't foxtrot. When the town wanted to put on its Sunday clothes and wash behind the ears, it put on a breakdown. The daring younger set would two-step and waltz, but the good church members and the elders stuck to the grand march. By rural canons, dancing is wicked, but one is not held to have danced until the feet have been crossed. Feet don't get crossed when one grand marches. At elaborate affairs, the organ from the Methodist Church was moved up to the hall, and Lizamore, the blind man, presided. When informal gatherings were held, he merely played his guitar, assisted by any volunteer with mouth organs or accordions. Among white people, the march is as mild as if it had been passed on by Volstead, but it still has a kick in Eatonville. Everybody happy, shining eyes, gleaming teeth, feet dragged, schlap, schlap, to beat out the time. No orchestra needed, round and round, back again, parsmila, schlap, schlap, strut, strut, seaboard, schlap, schlap. Titty bum, Mr. Clark in the lead with Mrs. Mosley. It's too much for some of the young folks. Double shuffling commences. Buck and wing. Lizamore about to break his guitar. Accordion doing contortions. People fall back against the walls and let the soloist have it, shouting as they clap the old double shuffle songs. Me and my honey got 2 more days to do de buck. Sweating bodies, laughing mouths, grotesque faces, feet drumming fiercely, deacons clapping as hard as the rest. Great big nigger, black as tar, trying to get to heaven on a 'lectric car. Some love cabbage, some love kale, but I love a gal with a short skirt tail. Long tall angel, steppin' down, long white robe and starry crown. Ah would not marry a black gal, bum bum. Tell you de reason why. Every time she comb her hair, she make de goo-goo eye, would not marry a yeller gal, bum bum. Tell you de reason why. Her neck so long and stringy, fraid she'd never die, would not marry a preacher. Tell you de reason why. Every time he comes to town, he makes de chicken fly. When the buck dance was over, the boys would give the floor to the girls, and they would parse me la with a sly eye out of the corner to see if anybody was looking who might have them up in church on conference night. Then there would be more dancing. Then Mr. Clark would call for everybody's best attention and announce that freshments was served. Every gentleman would please take his lady by the arm and scorch her right up to the table for a treat. Then the men would stick their arms out with a flourish and ask their ladies, "You lack chicken? Well then, take a wing." And the ladies would take the proffered wings and parade up to the long table and be served. Of course, most of them had brought baskets in which were heaps of jointed and fried chicken, 2 or 3 kinds of pies, cakes, potato pone, and chicken perlo. The hall would separate into happy groups about the baskets until time for more dancing. But the boys and girls got scattered about during the war, and now they dance the foxtrot by a brand new piano. They do waltz and two-step still, but no one now considers it good form to lock his chin over his partner's shoulder and stick out behind. One night, just for fun, and to humor the old folks, they danced, that is, they grand marched, but everyone picked up their feet. Bah! 12. The head of the nail. Daisy Taylor was the town vamp. Not that she was pretty, but sirens were all but non-existent in the town. Perhaps she was forced to it by circumstances. She was quite dark, with little brushy patches of hair squatting over her head. These were held down by shingle nails, often. No one knows whether she did this for artistic effect or for lack of hairpins, but there they were, shining in the little patches of hair when she got all dressed for the afternoon and came up to Clark's store to see if there was any mail for her. It was seldom that anyone wrote to Daisy, but she knew that the men of the town would be assembled there by 5 o'clock, and someone could usually be induced to buy her some soda water or peanuts. Daisy flirted with married men. There were only 2 single men in town, Lum Boger, who was engaged to the assistant school teacher, and Hiram Lester, who had been off to school at Tuskegee and wouldn't look at a person like Daisy. In addition to other drawbacks, she was pigeon-toed, and her petticoat was always showing, so perhaps he was justified. There was nothing else to do except flirt with married men. This went on for a long time. First one wife, then another, complained of her, or drove her from the preserves by threat. But the affair with Crooms was the most prolonged and serious. He was even known to have bought her a pair of shoes. Mrs. Laura Crooms was a meek little woman who took all of her troubles crying and talked a great deal of leaving things in the hands of God. The affair came to a head one night in orange picking time. Crooms was over at Oneida picking oranges. Many fruit pickers moved from one town to the other during the season. The town was collected at the store post office, as is customary on Saturday nights. The town has had its bath, and with its week's pay in pocket fares forth to be merry. The men tell stories and treat the ladies to soda water, peanuts, and peppermint candy. Daisy was trying to get treats, but the porch was cold to her that night. "Ah, don't care if you don't treat me. What's a dirty lil nickel?" She flung this at Walter Thomas. "The ever-loving Mr. Crooms will gimme anything at all a wants." You better shut up your mouth talking about Albert Crooms. Here his wife comes right now. Daisy went akimbo. Who? Me? I don't care what Laura Crooms think. If she ain't a heavy-hipped mama enough to keep him, she don't need to come crying to me. She stood making goo-goo eyes as Mrs. Crooms walked upon the porch. Daisy laughed loud, made several references to Albert Crooms, and when she saw the mailbag come in from Maitland, she said, "Ah, better go in and see if Ah ain't got a letter from Onido." The more Daisy played the game of getting Mrs. Crooms' goat, the better she liked it. She ran in and out of the store, laughing until she could scarcely stand. Some of the people present began to talk to Mrs. Crooms, to egg her on to halt Daisy's boasting, but she was for leaving it all in the hands of God. Walter Thomas kept on after Mrs. Crooms until she stiffened and resolved to fight. Daisy was inside when she came to this resolve and never dreamed anything of the kind could happen. She had gotten hold of an envelope and came laughing and shouting, "Oh, I can't stand to see Onido lose." There was a box of axe handles on display on the porch, propped up against the door jamb. As Daisy stepped upon the porch, Mrs. Crooms leaned the heavy end of one of those handles heavily upon her head. She staggered from the porch to the ground, and the timid Laura, fearful of a counterattack, struck again, and Daisy toppled into the town ditch. There was not enough water in there to do more than muss her up. Every time she tried to rise, down would come that axe handle again. Laura was fighting a scared fight. With Daisy thoroughly licked, she retired to the store porch and left her fallen enemy in the ditch. None of the men helped Daisy, even to get out of the ditch. But Elijah Mosley, who was some distance down the street when the trouble began, arrived as the victor was withdrawing. He rushed up and picked Daisy out of the mud and began feeling her head. "Is she hurt much?" Joe Clark asked from the doorway. "I don't know," Elijah answered. "I was just looking to see if Laura had been lucky enough to hit one of those nails on the head and drive it in." Before a week was up, Daisy moved to Orlando. There, in a wider sphere, perhaps, her talents as a vamp were appreciated. 15. Pants and Cowline. Sister Cowline Potts was a silent woman, did all of her laughing down inside, but did the thing that kept the town in an uproar of laughter. It was the general opinion of the village that Cowline would do anything she had a mind to. And she had a mind to do several things. Mitchell Potts, her husband, had a weakness for women. No one ever believed that she was jealous. She did things to the women, surely. But most any townsman would have said that she did them because she liked the novel situation and the queer things she could bring out of it. Once he took up with Delphine, called Miss Feeney by the town. She lived on the outskirts on the edge of the piney woods. The town winked and talked. People don't make secrets of such things in villages. Cowline went about her business with her thin black lips pursed tight as ever and her shiny black eyes unchanged. "Dat devil of a Cowline's got something up her sleeve." The town smiled in anticipation. "Delphine is too big a cigar for her to smoke. She ain't crazy," said some as the weeks went on and nothing happened. Even Feeney herself would give an extra flirt to her overstarched petticoats as she rustled into church past her of Sundays. Mitch Potts said furthermore that he was tired of Cowline's foolishness. She had to stay where he put her. His African soup bone, arm, was too strong to let a woman run over him. Nuff was nuff, and he did some fancy cussing, and he was the fanciest cusser in the county. So the town waited, and the longer it waited, the odds changed slowly from the wife to the husband. One Saturday, Mitch knocked off work at 2:00 and went over to Maitland. He came back with a rectangular box under his arm and kept straight on out to the barn and put it away. He ducked around the corner of the house quickly, but even so, his wife glimpsed the package, very much like a shoebox. So, he put on the kettle and took a bath. She stood in her bare feet at the ironing board and kept on ironing. He dressed. It was about 5 o'clock, but still very light. He fiddled around outside. She kept on with her ironing. As soon as the sun got red, he sauntered out to the barn, got the parcel, and walked away down the road, past the store, and out into the piney woods. As soon as he left the house, Caroline slipped on her shoes without taking time to don stockings, put on one of her husband's old Stetsons, worn and floppy, slung the axe over her shoulder, and followed in his wake. He was hailed cheerily as he passed the sitters on the store porch and answered smiling sheepishly and passed on. 2 minutes later, passed his wife silently, unsmilingly, and set the porch to giggling and betting. An hour passed, perhaps. It was dark. Clark had long ago lighted the swinging kerosene lamp inside. Once way back yonder, before the stars fell, all the animals used to talk, just like people. In them days, dogs and rabbits was the best of friends, even though both of them was stuck on the same gal, which was Miss Nancy Coon. She had the sweetest smile and the prettiest striped and bushy tail to be found anywhere. They both run their legs nigh off, trying to win her for themselves, fetching nice ripe persimmons and such. But she never give one or the other no satisfaction. Finally, one night, Mr. Dog popped the question right out. "Miss Coon," he says. "Ma'am, also ma'am, which would you ruther be, a lark flying or a dove a-settin'?" Course Miss Nancy, she blushed and laughed a little and hid her face behind her bushy tail for a spell. Then she said, sorter shy like, "I does love yo' sweet voice, Brother Dog, but I ain't just exactly set in my mind yit." Her and Mr. Dog set on a spell when up comes hopping Mr. Rabbit with his tail fresh washed and his whiskers shining. He got right down to business and asked Miss Coon to marry him too. "Oh, Miss Nancy," he says, "Ma'am, also ma'am, if you'd see me settin' straddle of a mudcat leadin' a minnow, what would you think? Ma'am, also ma'am," which is a out-and-out proposal, as everybody knows. "You's awful nice, Brother Rabbit, and a beautiful dancer, but you cannot sing like Brother Dog. Both you uns come back next week to gimme time for to decide." They both left arm in arm. Finally, Mr. Rabbit says to Mr. Dog, "'Tain't no use in me going back. She ain't gwinter have me, so I mought as well give up. She loves singin', and I ain't got nothin' but a squeak." "Oh, don't talk that away," says Mr. Dog, though he is glad Mr. Rabbit can't sing none. "Tha's all right, Brer Dog, but if I had a sweet voice like you got, I'd have it worked on and make it sweeter." "How? How? How?" Mr. Dog cried, jumping up and down. "Lemme fix it for you, like I do for Sister Lark and Sister Mockingbird." "When? Where?" asked Mr. Dog, all excited. He was figuring that if he could sing just a little better, Miss Coon would be bound to have him. "Just you meet me tomorrer in de huckleberry patch," says the rabbit, and off they both goes to bed. The dog is there on time next day, and after a while, the rabbit comes loping up. "Mawnin', Brer Dog," he says, kinder chippy-like. "Ready to git your voice sweetened?" "Sholy, sholy, Brer Rabbit. Let's we all hurry about it. I wants to serenade Miss Nancy from de piney woods tonight." "Well, den, open your moof and poke out your tongue," says the rabbit. No sooner did Mr. Dog poke out his tongue than Mr. Rabbit split it with a knife and ran for all he was worth to a hollow stump and hid himself. The dog has been mad at the rabbit ever since. Anybody who don't believe it happened, just look at the dog's tongue and he can see for himself where the rabbit slit it right up the middle. Stepped on a tin, Ma's story ends.
Thank you for watching. We're so glad you spent your time with us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It's a huge motivation for us to create more content. And make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new uploads. Thanks for your support, and see you in the next video.